Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments in life when we find ourselves holding on tightly to people, to places, to versions of ourselves that no longer feel alive. We cling not because they are still meant for us, but because they are familiar. And yet, life has a way of asking us, sometimes gently and sometimes with great force, to release what we can no longer carry. Today, I want to speak to you about the quiet courage it takes to let go, and why this act, though often painful, is one of the most necessary steps in our growth. Transformation begins quietly, like the first ripple on the surface of still water. At first, it is almost imperceptible, an undercurrent moving beneath the ordinary flow of daily life. You go about your routines, speaking to the same people, visiting the same places, fulfilling the same responsibilities, and yet, something feels subtly different. The familiar no longer feels entirely familiar. There is a faint dissonance, a quiet stirring in the depths of the self, as though some hidden part of you has begun to wake from a long sleep. The beginnings of change rarely arrive with fanfare. They do not shout their arrival from the rooftops or demand your immediate attention. Instead, they weave themselves into your inner world in whispers. A thought you might dismiss as passing begins to return again and again. A sudden moment of clarity interrupts a conversation. A dream leaves you unsettled long after you've woken. The psyche does not rush, it sends its signals slowly, giving you time to notice, to adjust, to prepare. You may find yourself feeling restless, but unable to name the cause. It is as if a thin thread has been tugged loose somewhere deep within you, and though the garment of your life still holds together, you sense that it will not remain unchanged for long. This restlessness is not always comfortable. It can make you question the path you're on, the people you surround yourself with, and even the values you have held for years. Yet the discomfort is not a sign of something gone wrong. It is the pressure of growth moving against the boundaries that once contained you. There is often a quiet detachment that accompanies this phase. You might still take part in old conversations, old habits, and old patterns, but there is a part of you watching from the outside, no longer as invested as before. This detachment can feel strange, even unsettling, but it is a necessary distance, the space in which you begin to see more clearly. Without it, you might never realize how much of what you have been living is simply inherited, repeated, or assumed, rather than consciously chosen. Sometimes this transformation begins with small, almost trivial changes. You might feel drawn to different books, music, or art. You might seek solitude more often, without quite knowing why. The conversations that once excited you may now feel empty, and you may find yourself hungering for deeper exchanges, ones that reach beneath the surface. This is the quiet call of the self towards something more aligned, more authentic, more alive. In this subtle beginning, you might also notice a heightened sensitivity. The emotions of others affect you more deeply. Beauty touches you in unexpected ways, the way light falls on a wall, the sound of leaves rustling in the wind, the unguarded laughter of a stranger. It is as though your senses are being tuned to a different frequency, preparing you to receive life in a new way. This is not by accident. The psyche readies itself for change not only through thought, but through the sharpening of perception. It is important to understand that such quiet beginnings are often misunderstood. We are accustomed to associating change with visible action, a new job, a move, a relationship ending or beginning. But the most profound shifts happen long before any of these outer events. They occur in the inner chambers of the mind and heart, where you start to reimagine who you are and what you are capable of. By the time transformation becomes visible to others, it has been unfolding within you for far longer than they realize. And so, in these early stages, there may be little to show for what is happening. From the outside, your life may appear unchanged, but inside, something essential is taking shape. The foundation of your identity is loosening. The fixed walls of your old self are beginning to give way. The change is not yet a storm, it is a shift in the wind, subtle but unmistakable to those who pay attention. This is why transformation often catches others by surprise. They see the moment you step into a new role, take a bold decision, or walk away from something familiar, and they imagine it happened suddenly. But you know it began long before that moment. It began in the quiet, in the whispers, in the half formed thoughts you didn't fully understand at first. It began in the subtle tension between who you have been and who you are becoming. The quiet beginning is not a time of inaction, though it may appear so. It is a time of deep preparation, where your inner world aligns itself with a new direction. You are gathering strength, insight, and courage, often without realizing it. The stillness before visible change is not emptiness, it is gestation. And within that gestation, something new, something essential is slowly, inevitably coming to life. Restlessness is often misunderstood. It is easy to label it as impatience, boredom, or dissatisfaction, but in truth, it is the language of the inner self trying to make itself heard. Beneath the surface of your routines, a quiet force begins to stir, urging you toward a horizon you have not yet seen. It is not a rebellion against the life you have built, but a sign that you have reached the edges of a map you have long been following. What once felt expansive now feels contained, and something within you longs for a larger space to inhabit. This restlessness does not always arrive at convenient times. It can creep into moments you once cherished. A familiar conversation suddenly feels hollow. The daily tasks that once gave you comfort now feel mechanical. Even the victories you worked so hard for may begin to lose their taste. This is not ingratitude, it is the soul reminding you that the purpose of a journey is not to arrive at a single destination, but to keep moving toward deeper truths. There is a subtle ache to this state, a sense of both yearning and discomfort. It is as if you are standing at the doorway of a room you have outgrown, still holding the keys, yet sensing that the real adventure lies outside. The furniture, the walls, even the view from the window, all of it remains the same, but it no longer stirs you in the way it once did. You realize that the change you are seeking is not in the decoration of the room, but in stepping beyond it altogether. At times, this restlessness can create tension with the people around you. Those who are content where they are may not understand why you are unsettled. They may encourage you to be grateful, to stay still, to hold on to what is known. And while gratitude is important, it does not erase the truth that something deeper is calling you forward. The longing you feel is not a rejection of the present, but an invitation to step into the next stage of your becoming. It often begins in the smallest ways. You may find yourself drawn to new ideas, picking up books or exploring topics you never cared for before. You might be compelled to change something seemingly minor, the way you spend your mornings, the places you visit, the conversations you seek. These small shifts are not random, they are your psyche's way of creating pathways to a new reality. Like roots searching for water, your curiosity begins to reach into unexplored soil. Sometimes, restlessness manifests in the body. There is a certain energy that will not let you sit still, an urge to move, to travel, to create. It can feel like carrying a fire within you, one that is both exhilarating and frustrating because you do not yet know where to direct its heat. And yet, this energy is a gift. It is the raw material from which new chapters are forged. Dreams can become more vivid during this time. Symbols, images, and emotions rise from the depths, offering hints of what your conscious mind has not yet named. A dream of crossing a bridge, of walking through unfamiliar landscapes, of meeting strangers whose faces you cannot recall. These are not random stories. They are messages from the unconscious, urging you to explore territories beyond the familiar. In this restless state, you might also find yourself remembering old desires, ones you buried under the weight of practicality or fear. They resurface now, not as idle fantasies, but as reminders of the paths you once imagined for yourself before you convinced yourself they were impossible. The restlessness presses you to ask, were they truly impossible, or did you simply stop believing? What makes restlessness so challenging is its ambiguity. It does not always present you with clear instructions. It does not say, go here, do this. Instead, it stirs the waters, making it difficult to remain still. You may try to quiet it by distracting yourself with busyness, but the unease returns when the noise fades. This is because restlessness is not meant to be silenced, it is meant to be followed, and yet, following it does not mean rushing headlong into action. The restlessness is as much about inner movement as it is about outer change. It asks you to explore the unseen boundaries within yourself, to test the edges of your beliefs, your habits, your fears. It is the psyche's way of reminding you that growth is not a comfortable process. It stretches, disrupts, and demands that you shed what no longer fits. The restlessness is not an enemy to be defeated, nor a flaw to be corrected. It is the pulse of evolution moving through you, urging you toward a self you have not yet met but are already becoming. There are seasons in life when certain people begin to fade from your days, not with dramatic arguments or decisive endings, but with a quiet and gradual distance. Conversations that were once effortless become less frequent. Shared interests lose their spark. The connection that once felt essential now feels somehow complete, as if the purpose of your crossing paths has already been fulfilled. This drifting is rarely intentional. It is the natural movement of human lives adjusting to their own evolving paths. Often, the first sign is subtle. Messages take longer to be answered. Meetings are postponed. You sense a difference in the rhythm between you, not because of anger or neglect, but because your worlds no longer overlap in the way they once did. At first, you may resist this change. You may reach out more often, try to hold onto the familiar closeness, or feel unsettled by the growing space between you. Yet beneath the discomfort, something deeper is happening. Both lives are aligning with the directions they are meant to take. There are times when this separation comes after a shared season of growth. A friend, a mentor, a partner, they may have been exactly what you needed in a certain chapter, helping you discover new parts of yourself. But once the lesson or experience has been integrated, the bond naturally loosens. It is not a rejection, but an evolution. Just as rivers branch and follow their own courses after flowing together for a time, people often part ways because life calls them to different landscapes. Sometimes, you are the one moving toward new horizons, and the people you once walked with choose to remain where they are. Other times, they are the ones who begin to explore new territories, while you remain in familiar ground. In both cases, there is no blame to assign. Each soul follows its own path, guided by its own inner compass, even when the directions no longer match. The drifting can also be a reflection of your inner changes. As your priorities shift, so do the people who feel aligned with your current state of being. If you begin valuing deeper conversations, you may naturally spend less time with those who prefer to stay on the surface. If you focus on healing and growth, relationships built on old wounds may no longer hold the same pull. This is not about superiority, it is about resonance. Certain frequencies match for a time, and then they no longer do. In this process, it is common to feel a mix of emotions. There can be sadness for what is ending, gratitude for what was shared, and even relief if the bond had begun to feel strained. At times, there is guilt or fear that allowing the distance means you are failing in your loyalty. But human connection is not measured only by its duration. It is also measured by its authenticity in each moment it exists. To force closeness when it no longer flows naturally is to deny the truth of what is. You may notice that as some people drift away, others arrive. Life does not leave the space empty for long. New relationships appear, often carrying qualities that support the person you are becoming. This shift is part of the continual exchange between endings and beginnings that shapes our journey. If the old connections remained out of habit alone, there would be no room for these new encounters to enter. Sometimes the drifting is mutual, and you both sense it without needing to say much. Other times, one person feels it before the other, which can make the transition more delicate. In either case, the most respectful approach is to honor what the relationship has been, rather than trying to force it into a shape that no longer fits. Even without formal closure, there can be an unspoken understanding, a quiet acknowledgement that your paths are now diverging, and that this too is a natural part of life. The truth is, we are not meant to carry every person from one chapter of life into the next. The people who remain will be those whose journeys continue to intertwine with ours, while others will walk different roads. And just as they drift from us, we drift from them, often without realizing it. This ebb and flow is not a flaw in human connection. It is the way life ensures we meet the people we need for the growth that is required in each moment. When you look back, you may see these shifts as threads in a larger pattern, each meeting and each parting part of the intricate design that has brought you to where you are. The drifting away is not an erasure of what was. It is simply the movement of life, making space for what is yet to come. Letting go is one of the most challenging acts in life, not because it is unnatural, but because it asks us to loosen our grip on what has already woven itself into the fabric of our identity. We hold on to people, places, routines, and beliefs as if they are anchors. Yet often they are simply familiar weights keeping us tethered to a shore we have already explored. There is a quiet fear in the thought of release, a fear that without these familiar points of reference, we will drift into uncertainty. And yet, life itself is a series of releases, a continual unbinding from what no longer serves the person we are becoming. The moment we begin to change, there is a subtle friction. Our new self begins to press against the boundaries of the old, and we feel a pull between holding on and moving forward. This pull is rarely comfortable. It may feel like the tearing of something within you, as the threads of old attachments loosen. But what is being torn is not the essence of who you are, it is the outdated layer that no longer reflects your truth. Letting go is not a single decision made in a moment of clarity. It is often a gradual process, a quiet unfastening. At first, you may find yourself revisiting memories, replaying old conversations, or holding on to what-ifs. You may feel the urge to fix, to revisit, to return things to how they once were. But eventually, there comes a realization that no amount of grasping can restore something to its earlier form. Time moves forward, and so must you. Sometimes, what we must release is not a person or a situation, but an idea, the picture of how we thought life would unfold. We create these inner maps with such care, and when reality strays from them, we cling harder, as if our insistence could bring the imagined path back into alignment. But life has its own intelligence, one that often leads us to places we could not have planned. Letting go of the imagined allows us to step into the actual, to meet the moment as it is, rather than as we wish it to be. The act of release can feel like stepping into emptiness. Without the old to cling to, there is a space, an open stretch of uncertainty. At first, it may feel like loss, but this space is not a void, it is a clearing. It is the ground from which the next chapter of your life will grow. If it remains cluttered with what you refuse to release, there will be no room for anything new to take root. Letting go also requires trust in yourself, and trust in the unfolding of your life. It asks you to believe that even if the present moment feels incomplete, there is meaning in what is leaving and what is arriving. Trust does not remove the ache of release, but it steadies you as you walk through it. There is a kind of wisdom in nature that mirrors this truth. Trees shed their leaves without resistance, not because they are eager to be bare, but because holding onto them through winter would weaken the whole tree. The shedding makes way for the renewal to come. In the same way, we must learn that our grip on the past, on what is finished, does not preserve us, it depletes us. Sometimes letting go is gentle. A friendship quietly fades, a habit naturally dissolves, a role in life shifts without struggle. Other times it is sharp and sudden, an ending that feels like it has been torn from you. Both forms are part of the same cycle. Whether soft or abrupt, each release makes space for the person you are in the process of becoming. The challenge is that we often mistake attachment for stability. We think that as long as we can hold on, we will remain safe. But safety built on clinging is fragile. True stability comes from knowing that you can stand even when the ground beneath you changes, even when the hands you once held are no longer there, even when the story you told yourself about who you are must be rewritten. There is a deep peace on the other side of release, though you may not see it in the moment. Letting go frees you not only from the weight of what is leaving, but also from the illusion that you must control everything that remains. It reminds you that life is not a possession to be managed, but a current to be moved with, and the current can only carry you forward if your hands are open. Letting go is not about loss. It is about allowing life to move freely through you. It is about creating the space for what is next, even when you cannot yet see it. The truth is, your future cannot arrive if your hands are full of what belongs to your past. So, when life calls you to release, do so not with fear, but with trust that what is meant for you will meet you on the path ahead.